Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Water Moon Cards. I'm your host, Luna, and I'm excited to get to the end of the first part of this Drop 'em 78 challenge. Now, if you're not sure what we're doing here or what the Drop 'em 78 challenge is all about, I do have an explainer video where I talk about what deck I'm using for this challenge and, the deck that I'm comparing it to and the whys and the wherefores and, getting more information about the challenge itself. So I'll link to that video in the description below so you can get kind of caught up on what I'm doing. But yeah, we're at the end of our first minor suit here. So I just thought I'd wrap up and talk about some discoveries I made over the 2 weeks and revisit some of my, favorite things that I sort of learned or want to think about even more with this deck. And just to remind you that Paul Hewson is getting his divinatory meanings from Atea. And what he says in his guidebook is that even 200 years or so earlier than Atea, there were these anonymous discorso writings that were circulating around Europe, and that we have only fragments of these from around 1550. And that's kind of the basis for a lot of cartomantic meanings as they came down through. I haven't done a lot of research on these discorso writings myself, so I can't, really fact check him. But that's the basis that he's writing from. And he says then Atea went on to provide not only keywords, but also synonyms, associated adverbs, adjectives, and that they all together build a character in the cartomancer's memory. And I love that description of like building up the character of a card. So you're not just memorizing a single keyword or a handful of keywords, you're really getting to know each card. And I think that's one of the benefits of doing an in-depth, card by card study of a deck like this, is that you sort of get to know their personality and they become more well-rounded. And that really helps with reading because then you have a lot to draw on that there's a richness there in that card. And, then once it's just like getting to know a person. You get to know them a little bit, and then you see them in another setting, and that reveals something else. And so as you do readings with the deck and you see cards in different combinations or an answer to different kinds of questions, that gets richer and richer. So I really like his description there. Hewson goes on to say that coins are associated with clover and therefore clubs in the French suit. But he doesn't provide any citation for that, and I don't really understand that. Normally, these days anyway, coins would be associated with pentacles, money, earth, that kind of thing. So, and then the club suit would actually be associated with the batons, which look like, cudgels. And that's the suit we'll be going to next. So I'm not really sure how he gets from coins to clubs versus coins to diamonds, which would be the French suit, and that would represent money as well. So if anyone knows why that might be, maybe Ina said something about it in her video, but so Ina over at Taproot Tarot did this Drop 'em 78 challenge this past late fall, and I've been holding off and not watching her videos because I don't want, spoilers. I want to make my own discoveries, then I'm going to go back and watch those. So that's a brief introduction to Hewson's view on this suit as a whole. He does mention very early playing cards, and so I wanted to look quickly at an example from the Mamluk playing cards. And this is not an actual Mamluk playing card. This is a sort of artistic reinterpretation. The original Mamluk playing cards were much longer. They were very tall and skinny and long, and those you can get replicas of now. What I have is an artistry interpretation by Ian Cumsty, who does old playing card styles. And so this is his deck, Cards from the Pattern Garden, where he's reinterpreted what these designs look like. But you can see they do look like coins, and they don't look like clovers at all. So I'm not sure where Paul Hewson's getting that assumption that he's making. All right, I'm going to break up our cute little vignette here and talk about some individual cards. All right, so for this coin suit, I wanted to talk about some trends I noticed and some questions I still have. And the first one is day versus night. There's a lot of cards in this particular suit that are set apparently at night. You can see either from the dark sky or the stars or the combination of those things. I would say that these all are set at night. And it's not apparent to me why they would be set at night necessarily. The Five of Coins does mention kind of a storm coming. So maybe this is more dark clouds or dark sky ahead of a storm than it is nighttime. But these other ones, especially the Herald in the Three of Coins, usually you would be traveling by day, not in the nighttime. If you're going to be announced and there's going to be a crowd of people to greet you, that would generally be a daytime activity. And then, this guy forging, normally that wouldn't happen at night. You wouldn't have enough natural light to do that. So I'm not really clear on these visual choices that he's made, and he doesn't seem to describe that. He doesn't refer to, the time of day really in the guidebook. And then the other big question I have or discovery that I've made is about the number of people in the cards. So in all of these cards, in the Smith-Waite, which is the one that I'm using for a comparative reference, there is only one figure in those cards, and in Paul Hewson's deck, we have more figures in all of these cards, 2 and sometimes even more than that. So, and I like that because often, when I read tarot, it's about what's going on. So what's going on in my life right now? What's coming up for me in the future? And even if it's an internal kind of question, like, what sort of spiritual challenge am I facing or that kind of thing, often those things are influenced by the world around us and the people around us. And so I like having representations with multiple people because to me, that's just a lot more realistic with how my lived experience goes. We're influenced by the actions and the decisions and the biases and all of that of other people as much as we are reacting to our own individual ideas. In particular, I like that the Four of Coins shows this relationship. So what happens when you hoard versus give away money, and how does that affect the people around you? I like the 2 because we have this, interruption or this like lots going on that you have to juggle, as opposed to the 2 in the Waite-Smith, which is just one guy holding 2 things. But again, this could be, I have too much on my to-do list, but this is more realistic where like things are going on in my environment that I have to deal with, I have to react to. In the 7, we have this woman at the money changer, and this is a different kind of a scene than the guy in his garden checking up on his thing, but it is still sort of like checking on your investment. Again, maybe not necessarily something that you're doing on your own though. Your investment is with a bank or it's with another person's enterprise or something like that. So their actions are going to affect you just as much as your own tending of matters is going to affect the outcome. And then in the 8 of Coins, we have not just the solo worker, but we have the customer who's going to buy the work. So looking at that as the effort that you're putting in and the value of it, or how it's going to be valued by the person that's going to receive the results of your effort. And then the 9 of Coins was a massive revelation for me, which I'll get to in a moment, but just the fact that she is the wealthy person and she's directing other people's activities, and we can see the effect of her wealth on their lives and the interaction of their action on, her desired results. It's all a give and take going on in this card. I did also have one serious disappointment in this suit, and that was the court cards. They're pretty to look at, but Hewson's description of them and his assignment to different, famous fictional or historical characters, really, I don't think it added anything at all to the way that I would interpret these cards in a reading. He's got Lancelot for the Knave of Coins. That doesn't really make sense to me because Lancelot was a knight, so I would assume he'd be the Knight of Coins if he was going to be anybody. But if he was going to be the Knight of something, then I would actually put him on the Knight of Cups. So that's weird. For some reason, Paul Hewson does not put the knights with famous figures. He only does it for the knaves, queens, and kings. Then he's got Argene for this queen, but that's confusing because he doesn't even seem to know who Argene is. If you read the guidebook, it's all over the place. And then for Alexander, sure, it's Alexander the Great. Okay, that works. And he was apparently very generous with his troops. Fine. But I would already equate a king of coins as someone who is wealthy and potentially generous. So I'm not sure that adds, an extra layer of richness, like I said, to my readings. So, and then just to spotlight one particular clarification that I found extremely helpful was to finally differentiate between the nine of coins and the queen of coins. This is something that has kind of stumped me all along, I'll admit. I've never been really strong in being able to distinguish these two cards. And I think that's because if we compare them with the Waite deck, the Waite-Smith deck, there isn't a lot of distinction visually or in the description of what these cards mean. In each of Waite's cards, we have a solo female who's just kind of hanging out, enjoying, staring at some aspect of her luxury. Falconry would have been an activity that only the most wealthy people could afford at this time, and even today, it's a very expensive hobby. Because falcons need a lot of maintenance. So you either have to kind of do it as a full-time job, or you have to hire somebody to help you train and maintain your falcon. And then, this Queen of Pentacles is in this luxurious garden, and she's got beautiful accoutrements and a crown and all this, and she's staring deeply into this pentacle. So it's like, what's the difference between these two cards? This one, even, a lot of times people will say luxury and so forth. And I think the keywords, even in Hughson's book, do refer to luxury in both of these, or, wealth or graciousness or that kind of thing. So, okay, where's the difference? Well, the difference for me is in this card. This is what money buys you. This is what happens when you get rich. Then you have to employ a bunch of people and have them run things for you, because your estate and your plans and your job is just too big for one person to actually accomplish. You can't build the castle and water the garden and train the falcon and cook the food and do all the other things. So this really clarifies, and it also ties in with a numerical association that I've long used for the nines, and that's struggle. Nines are like, you may have a lot, but it's a heavy load to carry. And I don't just use that for the Nine of Wands. I use it for all four of the nines. So that was really helpful. And then here, this is the luxury card. The Queen of Coins has it all. She's seated, she's by herself. She's enjoying a quiet moment. There's no servants or anyone around her, and she's just enjoying her luxury. And so that to me is an important distinction. And I think it's going to help me not feel so like, what do I do when, one or the other, or heaven forbid, both of these cards show up in a reading, and then you're like, okay, how do I make sense out of this? So that was an amazing discovery, and basically worth the price of admission. If I learned nothing else in this whole challenge, I think this will be worth the time it's taken to sit down and read through both of these guidebooks and contemplate the different sets of artwork. And lastly, I did get a little flummoxed on the King of Coins, or King of Pentacles, from Waite, and his contrast with what Hughson was saying about the King of Coins. So as I mentioned at the start of the video, Hughson says that the coins do represent money, but that they're acquainted with clubs in the French suit, whereas Waite is saying that pentacles don't have anything to do with money, but they are equated with pentacles. I think he would have equated these with diamonds, if I'm not misreading him, even though he says these don't have to do with money. So I'll just read you what Waite says in the Pictorial Key to the Tarot. He says, "The suit of pentacles, the king. This figure calls for no special description. The face is rather dark, suggesting also courage, but somewhat lethargic in tendency." And I think that's a tinge of eugenics that does actually run through his writing. So just be aware, there's definitely some racism in here. The bull's head should be noted as a recurrent symbol on the throne. The sign of this suit is represented throughout as engraved or emblazoned with the pentagram, typifying the correspondence of the four elements of human nature and that by which they may be governed. So he's talking about fire, water, earth, and air, I believe. In many old tarot packs, this suit stood for current coin money deniers. I have not invented the substitution of pentacles. And that's true. Count de Gobelin invented the suit of pentacles. I was just rereading some of my tarot history. So Waite did not change, he was not the one who changed coins to pentacles. That came earlier, but he and Crowley read Count de Gobelin and loved his esoteric writings and based a lot of their stuff and their decks on his work. Waite says, I have no special cause to sustain in respect of the alternative. So I guess he's saying he's not trying to hold up an alternative view. I don't really understand him here. But the consensus of divinatory meanings is on the side of some change because the cards do not happen to deal especially with questions of money. So he's saying this is more about work, effort, that kind of thing. He says divinatory meanings are valor, realizing intelligence, business, and normal intellectual aptitude, sometimes mathematical gifts and attainments of that kind, success in these paths. So it has more to do with manifesting, attainment generally, work, business dealings, so that kind of thing, wheeling, dealing, and not necessarily with the cash aspect. Which I would disagree with, but hey, everybody's entitled to write their own tarot book the way that they want to. So that's slightly a little bit of clarification. Still not entirely sure what Waite's getting at, but if you have other insights into, how he was interpreting this versus maybe earlier cartomantic interpretations, feel free to leave a comment below. Okay, that's all I've got for you on the coins/pentacle suit. And I'm already into the baton suit, the next suit, in my shorts. So if you haven't checked out my daily updates card by card, feel free to go ahead and sign up for the notifications on that if you want to see my daily draws. They've been really interesting. I've been having a lot of fun, and I'll be doing another wrap up when we get to the end of that suit as well. Until then, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.